What's going on, guys? It's Josh here at 3:23 in the morning. I'm having some difficulty sleeping, and so I decided to study for the GRE, and figured I'd make a video kind of addressing the conclusion of my summer training, what went wrong, what went right, what kind of programs I was running, what kind of programming, rep schemes, diet I was on, stuff like that. Not that anybody really cares, it's just I kind of like making these videos. Maybe somebody will watch them someday and get something out of them. That's kind of the goal of this channel. So my summer training overall, if I had to summarize it pretty quickly, is I wasn't necessarily disappointed with it. There was several parts of the training program that I was immensely happy with, that I was kind of surprised with, and there was a lot of instances of the training program that I was relatively disappointed with, or outright upset with. To begin with, what I ended up doing for this training cycle, but I've never really done this methodology of training before. I typically just kind of do whatever the fuck I want, but I actually tried to run a really regimented, programmed workout routine for about 4 months. And it was kind of fucking hard. I'm not going to lie. It was one of the more difficult things that I've done training-wise. My body is beat to shit at the moment. I'm not injured. Most of it is simply fatigue. And so what I decided to do is that the rest of this week I'm taking off and starting back up again with just some lighter training. And then I'll hop back into a legitimate training program when I can find a meet. So that should be about 2 weeks from now when I actually start legitimately training again. Next week is kind of like a get back into it period. But for what I ended up doing, it was a relatively simplistic training program. It was essentially deviations for bench and squat of the Damien Pizzuti squat program that he posted on his Instagram story. I took a notice to the program after a friend of mine, Jack, actually ran the program and saw a relatively considerable amount of progress on a squat. He saw around 20 to 30 pound increases across all rep ranges from 10, 5, 2, 3, and he ended up hitting a 500 pound single on squats at, I do believe, mid 180s, which is a relatively impressive lift. And so I figured I'd give it a try. I was kind of tired of running hyper high volume shit like Smolov, and admittedly, none of the cycles that I've ran Smolov I was able to, or I wasn't able to actually keep up with the rep ranges and shit like that, and I would almost always bottom out on that program, and so I figured it was time to try something new. So, the way this program is formatted, I'm sorry, I'm having all kinds of problems in here. Anyway, so the way this program's formatted is that you have 3 week rep cycles, and so the first 3 weeks you run 10s. Let's say you want to run it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's a 3-day week program. Monday, or the first day of the week, you try and set a 10 rep max or close enough to a 10 rep max, and then you have a set at 95%. So 95% of the 10 rep max you just hit, and then you have another set at 90% of the 10 rep max you just hit. That's Monday. And supplemental work, you choose a leg exercise. The program recommends leg extensions, but it doesn't have to be leg extensions. It can be hamstring curls, front squats. And you do, at minimum, 100 reps. Set number doesn't really matter. Set volume doesn't really matter. If you want to do 10 sets of 10, 5 sets of 20, 4 sets of 25, I mean, you can do whatever. And that was it. And so you do that for 3 weeks. So you try and attempt to set 3 successive 3 rep maxes within a 3-week period. The Wednesday of the 3-day week program was a rest day with this program. So if Monday was the setting the 10 rep max and then the sets at 95 and 90, Wednesday you had 3 sets of 10 at 80% of your 10 rep max that you hit on Monday, or if you hit a 10 rep max on Monday. And then Friday with the program would be kind of like a relatively, if I had to put it into some kind of connotation, to be a working set day. relatively difficult sets. It was 3 sets of 10 at around 90% of your 10 rep max. So, I mean, those are difficult, and with this, you're still doing the 100 reps of your chosen leg exercise as well. So there wasn't a lot of volume there, but it was difficult sets, and I really liked that. And so after 3 weeks of doing that with the 10s, you move into the 5 rep range. And so it's the same thing. Monday, you try and set a 5 rep max. You do 95% and then 90%. And Wednesday, you do 80% of your 5 rep max. And then Friday, you do 90% of your 5 rep max. And then after 3 weeks of that, you move into the 3s. Same thing. 3 weeks of that, you move into the 2s. And then the single is essentially you do whatever warm-up that you feel comfortable with, and you attempt new 1 rep max on squats. I did the same program with bench press. However, I anticipated that I was going to have a lot more anatomical breakdown or fatigue, given the nature of the muscles actually used in the bench press motion. So what I decided to do to account for that, I took a week off every rep range cycle. So I only did 2 weeks of 10s, 2 weeks of 5s, 2 weeks of 3s. But what I decided to do was that since it was a lot less volume, but it was a lot higher intensity, was that I did 3 weeks with the 2s. And so to kind of make up for the fact. And it actually worked out really well. And the same thing, I did the same thing with the rep ranges. I chose a chest exercise. I tended to alternate it between close grip bench, flat dumbbell bench, or incline bench for my 100 reps of supplementals. And for deadlift, I actually, it was a cone, and I want to say Philip or Felipe, perhaps, deadlift spreadsheet. It was essentially a 10-week program that I played around with a little bit. I didn't necessarily agree with the amount percent increases that I was seeing in a lot of the working sets. Some of the jumps were just absolutely astronomical on that program, and so what I did was I modified it to be just a little bit shorter, and I took out some of those sets and I made them kind of closer to each other to where there was a much more linear rate of progression than per se just these giant peaks with exertion and so forth in my programming. To start with squats first. Initially, the squat program went very well. My original 10 rep max on squats in knee sleeves before this program was, I want to say 330. That sounds about right. It was around 330. And I made a leap with myself, and I decided that I was going to start the program out at 345. I had been training relatively consistently on squats, nothing with the like a 10 rep max volume or something like that, but I was still training relatively consistently, so I figured that if we were going to jump into this program, then we were going to jump into it right. And so the first day, that Monday that I decided to squat, I went for 345 and actually did it relatively easy. I do remember the last 2 reps not being the cleanest, but it was a good starting point. I ended off the 10 rep program, or the 10 rep cycle, with a 365-pound squat max at 10 reps. And I was relatively impressed with myself. I was a little concerned on the last rep of the 365 working set. I did have a lot of leaning forward during the initial stages of the lift because a lot of that was backtracking and my back was relatively fatigued. I do remember this. Ended the 5 rep cycle at 395, which was... No, actually, I didn't end the 5 rep cycle at 395. I ended the 5 rep cycle at 415, which is where things started to go wrong. So the 415 5 rep max that I hit was in sleeves, a belt, and wrist straps at Fit for the King. And I distinctively remember me being extremely uncomfortable during that set. And what do I mean by extremely uncomfortable? I mean that I felt like I wasn't in control of the weight. the way that I wanted to be. I felt like that every single rep was just an absolute grind, and I felt like the exertion that I had in that set wasn't going to be repeatable in another 5 rep max. It might have just been how I felt that day. It might have been I took more pre-workout than I typically do, but I just didn't feel comfortable on that set, and I was I think scared would be a good word for it, for how I was going to work into my 3 rep maxes, because if I ended at 415, it would be illogical for me to simply just start my 3 rep maxes at 420 or something like that. And so I figured that it would be a rational decision to start my 3 rep cycle at 425. And that initially went really well too, but I still had that same feeling that the weight was too heavy. I wasn't controlling it the right way, or maybe I was too light. I didn't know. But around this time, I actually had to move to Bloomington. I lived in an apartment up in Bloomington for around 2 months. I had to take a summer organic chemistry class up in Bloomington. And around 3 weeks in, so I finished the 3 cycle, and I ended up with a 430 pound 3 rep squat max. And I ended up having to do that in reps, which it is what it is. That was still a 15-pound wrapped triple PR. What happened is that around the 3rd week of me being up in Bloomington, a stomach virus went around at the campus that I was taking my summer classes, and I caught it relatively early on, and I was unable to squat for about 2 weeks. I was actually really, really sick for about 2 weeks. I lost around 6.5 pounds. I didn't really want to eat anything, and the only thing that I did eat was essentially out-of-the-bag breaded chicken that I cooked in the oven. And so I was maybe averaging around 1,600 calories a day. And pretty much the only nutritional value that I was getting was through just like Gatorade, Coke Zeros, and this chicken that I was cooking. And so when I was finally able to go back to the gym, I pretty much expected that I was going to see an incremental percentage drop off, or an exponential percentage drop off in my squat routine. What I didn't expect was the rate by which I had lost not so much strength but stability on my squat. So when I went back to the gym that I was going to while I was up in Bloomington and attempted to jump back into the 2-rep cycle, I tried to start off my 2-rep cycle at just a 10-pound increase on my 3-rep max that I ended up setting. So it was a 435-pound squat for 2. And I decided to do it in reps. I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to hit it in sleeves. When I set up for it and I lifted it off, lift-off strength was still there. There was a lot of shakiness in the knees, and I felt a little bit of some tremors in my hamstrings. I figured this was normal. I had experienced this before with weights over 420 pounds. I don't typically go that heavy when I'm not training for a program. And like I said, I don't very often run programs like this. But when I went to go do the first rep, I hit the bottom, and it honestly should have come up. I probably honestly should have dumped it. It was one of the ugliest squats that I've ever done. It was basically no legs. It was essentially driving at like an angle like this, with this 430 pounds on my back. And I'm not a big person, and I should know better that I could get really hurt doing stuff like that. So knowing that I had made a mistake, I decided to go ahead and rack the weight. And with that feeling, what I tried to do is I tried to go down and just hit my 95% set based off of a 430 2-rep max. And I barely hit that one. And I actually bottomed out and failed at my 90% single. And so no matter how hard I tried, I could never jump back into the rhythm of the squat program. And so what I basically ended up doing was I just tried really, 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 really hard to kind of find a rep scheme and work myself back into the squat program. I what did I do? I did sets of 3. I did sets of 5. I mean, I just kind of reverted back to a very basic powerlifting scheme on squats to kind of keep a base for deadlift. And I don't think I made any other remarkable progress. I did end up with Summer's End to build up my 2-rep squat max in Walmart reps back up to 445 pounds. No new 1-rep maxes, nothing along those lines. And that's about it with squats. I would say that squats are probably the most disappointing aspect of my summer training program. I was really excited to potentially see my squat, which has historically held me back quite significantly in my training, especially in my deadlift and especially in my comp totals, to kind of like progress and flourish. And I was really excited to see some growth in my legs that I am extremely self-conscious about. And it kind of went to shit, but I mean, that happens, and I'm not going to beat myself up over it too much. Moving on to bench press. What I noticed with the bench press program is that hitting the rep maxes at a similar progression rate on squats was a lot more difficult on bench than it was on squats. And I think the reason what that is, like I said earlier in the videos, is the nature of the muscles being used in a bench press. There's a lot less of the kind of the bigger, more dominant muscle groups. I mean, you do have the pectorals, major, minor, the triceps, the shoulders. If you're doing it correctly, in the upper lats, the traps. So the first 10 rep max that I sent, and I ran this all pause reps. The first 10 rep max I set was at 295, and I ended up hitting a 10 rep max of 300 on bench press. It was relatively clean. I think my butt might have came off the bench for the 9th, but I did manage to reset my position relatively well. 5 rep max, I ended my training cycle with a titanic PR of my original 5 rep max on pause reps before this program was I think it was 320, and I ended this program as a 5 rep rotation with a 340 pound 5 rep max, 3 rep cycle. Original 3 rep max on pause reps was I do believe 335. I ended the 3 rep cycle with a 365 pound squat max on pause. I actually posted that video if you guys want to look at it. 2 rep cycle, like I said, I ran for 3 weeks. I started off my 2 rep cycle at 370 pounds. I ended up building up to a 380 pound double on bench press, which was another massive PR considering that my old pause rep double was 350, and that was honestly the largest percent increase that I've seen across the rep ranges. And when I went to max, this was probably the most happy that I've been with the program. Originally, my 1 rep max with a clean competition, pause, press, ass on the bench, everything else, lockout, was, I do believe, around 380. And I ended up hitting a 25 pound PR and a lifelong goal of mine, and I hit 405 for a relatively shaky single. There was a little bit of butt movement at the beginning. But even then, before that, I hit one of the cleanest heavier bench presses that I've ever done in training with 395 pounds. So if I'm considering saying that the 395 was the more legit of the 2 lifts. I will post the video in kind of like a recap of my best summer lifts video. But yeah, I ended up hitting either a 405 or 395 pound bench press. And yeah, that was honestly probably the happiest that I've been in quite some time. Deadlift is one of those things that, or at least is the portion of this story that I wish had gone better. The Ed Coan deadlift program, like I said, there was just exponential increases in the working sets that they wanted you to do in this program, and I initially really had difficulty doing the sets on this program, which I just kind of figured was expected. Especially given like the nature of this program, it was supposed to or advertised to be around a 35 to 45 pound PR in a period of around 10 weeks, and I didn't get quite that out of it. I did end up seeing a 15 pound PR out of the program. So my max before this my max before this program was around 550 on deadlift. I may have hit a 555 somewhere in between there, but I can't remember. I've been fucked up since then. So going through the program, I set numerous rep maxes. I've never been able to hit doubles with consistently with weight over 500 pounds, and I ended up setting a new 2 rep max on deadlift at 540 pounds. I set a new 1 rep max at 565 pounds, and honestly, I probably should have just maxed that day that I pulled 565 because, and you'll see it in the video, the speed by which the 565 came off the ground, it was honestly readily apparent that I was in full peak, and that was probably going to be the apex point by which my strength was going to just appreciate from then on out. So the next day, or the day that the program wanted me to max, was that Tuesday, and I attempted 585 pounds. I really wanted to hit it, and I'll post this in the video as well. The off the floor speed was really good. I got past my knees. I didn't have very much lean with the bar. I just physically couldn't log it out, which to me doesn't necessarily constitute a form issue. I've ridiculed and modified my form to the point where I can't really see any issues with it outside of merely physiological things that I can't really change. So that becomes indicative to me that I just simply didn't have the strength in my upper back, and especially the upper part of the deadlift to finish it out. So really disappointing. I was really looking forward to hitting a 585, 600 pound deadlift at around 145 pounds, which is what I hit my 405 bench press or 395 pound bench press at 145.8 pounds was my last weigh-in before I did that. So yeah, and that's about it. What I plan on doing is that I plan on running a very similar training scheme to what I did this summer. The only difference is that I'm going to make it a point to try and not get sick. In saying that, I can't really control the fundamental elements of microbiology, so I'll try my best. I am currently in a rather pernicious financial situation by which I don't have a job, and the apartment up in Bloomington and taking classes up in Bloomington ended up being significantly more expensive than I had originally anticipated. So to my name, I have around $3,400, which is a far cry from what I started off with at the summer, which means that actually going about getting what I need to complete this training program, maintain a healthy diet, is going to be difficult unless something changes. I am looking into whatever job I can find at this point. But another problem that is presenting itself relatively quickly and relatively unfortunately is my graduate school conundrum. Not so much a conundrum, but a problem made by my own doing. And that is that I have to take the GRE on relatively short notice, as is seen with this prep book here. I will be taking the test October 20th, and I will also begin the application process to several graduate programs, many of which will be in history, many of which will be in history and medicine, not biology and medicine. So there's a lot on my plate at the moment, and I don't quite know when would be a good time to sign up for a meet. So the training cycle might actually begin a little bit later than 2 weeks from now. But I'm going to start consistently training like a powerlifter or a power bodybuilder again within the next 2 weeks. Whether or not I start the desired training cycle that I'm going to do for the meet within that time period is still up for debate, because I still have to find a meet I'm going to be able to participate in and adequately train for without interfering in my schooling. This is my senior year, and my GPA's at a level by which I'd like to see some improvement, just kind of help my chances to get into graduate school. I think that it sits right now around B+ average, which isn't bad by any means, but a lot of the programs that I'm looking to get into are relatively competitive, so we'll see where it goes from here. I'm both excited and a little bit concerned for the next couple months. I've reached a point in my schooling to where I think that some of the decisions that I've made in the classes that I've chosen to take are more out of desire to make money out of rather than out of interest. And I think that my grades in those classes have begun to show that that is a fact. And I really don't know if I want to subject myself to further depreciation of my GPA and my chances of getting into graduate school by simply taking classes that I think will land me a high-paying job. And I'm honestly looking at several history degrees instead of career paths in medicine, which I really want to like biology and everything else. It's just I'm having a very difficult time finding joy in the classes that I'm taking. Whilst in history, there's been one history course, 2 history courses that I haven't gotten A's in at Hanover. I've taken almost every American history course out of Hanover. I've taken all but 4 of the 300 level classes out of Hanover, which is the highest that they offer. So I'm just not sure, and there's a lot of uncertainty going into this. But one thing is for certain is that I do have my training program all planned out. I know what needs to be done. I know what I'm going to have to do. I know what expectations I have for myself, and there's a lot of things going on right now that I'm also having to deal with. So take that as you will. I hope this helps people out in their summer training videos if they want to kind of look at something or get something to gauge their progress off of. Yeah, and with that, I will see you guys later.